test, test. Can you all hear me? Yes? Wait? Okay. Perfect. Welcome, everybody. It's such a pleasure to see everybody. First, I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank Women in Tech for helping us host and all be here together. So just a quick round of applause for everybody here. Thank you all. What an amazing turnout. My name is Frank Leese. I am one of the co-founders of Howdy. If you want to know more, you can go to howdy.com, and I'll just leave it at that. I have the pleasure tonight of introducing our host, Jacqueline Samira. She's over here on the left-hand side. Jacqueline Samira, for those of you who might not know, is actually the founder and CEO of Howdy. She is one of the more, I think anyway, one of the more notable entrepreneurs here in Austin. Her specialty that is her specialty. She can do it reliably. And believe it or not, she is the kind of person who, when she wanted to bootstrap Howdy, her baby, she decided, you know what I need to do? I need to go do some sales consulting for a few months, build up a treasure chest of $200,000, and use that to bootstrap my company, just to give you a sense of the kind of person and the kind of experience that she has. So it's with my pleasure to introduce Jacqueline and the rest of the panelists and speakers. Please give a round of applause to my co-founder and Jacqueline Samira.
Thank you. It's probably not good to be introduced because now I'm embarrassed. Thank you, that was really nice, Frank. So like he said, thank you all for being here. We're really, really excited to host this event. One of the reasons we're excited to host this event is because branding has been something that our company has been focused on since the beginning of 2023. And as we've gone through this exploration, we've been very privileged. Our company originally started in Austin in 2018. It was actually called Austin Software. And we've had a lot of success, and we were able to use that to acquire the domain howdy.com, which is a pretty awesome domain, especially being in Austin, Texas. So we went through a ton of branding exercises for the company, and as we were doing that, we realized, more important or equal in importance is also our personal brands. And so in tandem with building the Howdy brand, we've been also learning and building our own personal brand. And we've learned a lot along the way. We've met a lot of amazing people with tremendous influence, and so we figured we'd share that all here with you. And of course, I want to thank our co-hosts, like Frank mentioned, Women in Tech. Of course, women hold a place dear in my heart, and I do believe we need more representation in technology. There used to be more representation in technology before the 80s. We're having some technical difficulties. Before the 80s, and I think that the more we can do, the more we can invest. A rising tide lifts all boats. So that is something we are very excited to do. So we want to present the value of personal branding, share some things that we've learned along the way, and of course, allow you guys to learn from some of the experts in the field. And Frank already gave me the intro, so I'll just quickly go through those. But yeah, I've helped my companies raise over $44 million in venture capital. I've also made them over $150 million in revenue. I've led growth for 3 different Y Combinator teams. And recently, as of December 2022, our company Howdy was valued at over $100 million. So thank you. So what is it? What are we going to do? We help companies source, hire, and manage developers in LATAM. And something that we're very excited about is we're moving it beyond developers, hiring all kinds of folks all throughout South America. So if you want to learn more, of course, you can go to howdy.com, and that's the last thing we'll say about our company. So why are we here? Why personal branding? What is personal branding, other than a seriously played out buzzword, which we know? Let's talk about it. First, your brand can come in many different shapes and sizes. In some cases, it can be a blog. In others, it can be social media. And then, of course, in the most traditional sense, and also the hardest sense, it could be mass media. And your brand can show just one version of yourself, or it can give carte blanche access to your whole life. But why should you care? And why do you need a personal brand as a professional? This is something that was really eye-opening to me at the beginning of this year. Well, when we started to do the research, the numbers don't lie. And what we learned was that 92% of folks trust recommendations from individuals over businesses or corporate messages. And when it comes to swaying consumers, nothing beats word of mouth advertising ever. Like, word of mouth is the best form of advertisement that we can have. It's been true, this says since 2012, but I believe it's been true since the dawn of time. 74% of American consumers trust products or services from a person with a strong personal brand. And something that's interesting is a lot of entrepreneurs are starting to figure this out, and what they're doing is they're outsourcing it to a PR agency. And it's always better when people do it themselves. It's always better when founders build it themselves because it's more genuine and authentic. So what that tells me, and what tells all of us, is there's a huge opportunity to build your brand right now yourself, not using an agency, because really then you just become like a shell of a corporation yourself. Also, over 50% of people prefer doing business with people with trustworthy personal brands, and in fact, 51% of folks actively seek it. Also, 77% of social media discussions revolve around people seeking advice, and they prefer to, of course, interact with an individual over a company. You don't usually just reach out to a company, and if you do, that's like when you're desperate, you've gone to the website, you've called them, you've emailed them, they're like not answering, so you go to their Facebook and you're like, somebody answer me. That's usually the experience you have, right? So it's easy to dismiss it. I am personally can attest to this. It's easy to dismiss it as a brand or as a fad. It's easy to say, I'm not an influencer, I'm a professional, I'm this, I'm that. Like, I would never do that. But in reality, it is something that could really fundamentally change not only your position within your own organization, it can change your own ability to get promoted, to get a job, whether it is you're building your own company or if you are actually within a company yourself. So this was an interesting, I did not know this stat, but when senior leaders at a company have a strong social media, a whopping 82% of customers are more likely to deem that company trustworthy, which is kind of insane. And we don't need you guys to be TikTok stars, unless that's what you want. You could do that. But LinkedIn has a whopping 830 million users. That blew my mind. Furthermore, LinkedIn is actually second in B2B marketing behind Facebook. So there is a lot of power in LinkedIn if you guys are not there right now. So what, right? Let's think about this. Personal branding creates a community, it establishes credibility, and most importantly, it leads to influence. And similar to what I was just saying just a minute ago, this is the reason we brought you all here, to hear from our expert panel, because we want to help you guys build your influence, whether that's so you can have more leverage in your life, or you can have added value within your own company if you want to get promoted, or if you want to get a raise, or if you want to be a more attractive candidate in the workforce, and then of course, or if you want to build influence for your own company, for your own success. So let's get this party started, and let me introduce you to our expert panel. So first and foremost, I want to introduce Dr. Natasha Kathuria. She is not only a medical doctor, of course, she is an executive medical doctor for 16 ERs in Austin and Houston, Texas. She became a prominent public figure in medicine during the COVID-19 pandemic, and she has been featured on BBC World News, ABC News, Fox News, CBS News, and Yahoo Finance. So please welcome Dr. Kathuria. Next, we have Cathryn Lavery. She is the founder of Best Self Company. I don't know if you guys have ever seen any of her products. I brought it. Did you know I brought this? She's got this awesome relationship journal that I literally just bought for my husband and I. She's a serial entrepreneur, best known for founding Best Self Company, founder of the thriving blog, LittleMike.com. She was selected for Forbes 30 Under 30 and has been featured in Entrepreneur, MTV, Huffington Post, Forbes, Inc. magazine, and more. So please welcome Cathryn. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce you to Scott Leese. He is the CEO and founder of Scott Leese Consulting. He is a 6-time sales leader, 4-time founder, 3 times author, and grew his consulting business to $5 million in revenue, which is just insane. Serves some of the fastest growing tech companies in the world, and has amassed over 108,000 followers on LinkedIn. He shares no-nonsense insights and tips on building highly profitable revenue streams and personal online brands. So please welcome Scott. And by the way, I have a list of questions that I'm going to be asking the panelists this evening. If you have any questions, you can scan the QR code, and there's a Google form, and you can say who you want to ask it to, and then the question. And then at the end of our panel, I will be reading those questions. So, all right, let's get started. Thanks, everyone. How's it going? Do your mics work? I think you have to turn them on.
Yes, they should.
Now it works.
Now it works. Can you guys hear us all okay?
Yes. All right. Well, hold on. I gotta get my questions. I didn't pre-plan this part. Mic's not working. Oh no. I'll be loud for this part. Sure. Thank you.
All right. Okay. In the era of social media, this first part's going to talk about personal journey. So in the era of social media, being genuine seems to be a secret ingredient behind building personal branding. People relate to success stories as an influencer, but when you as an influencer make them a part of that journey, it's all the more interesting. Almost as if you're living the story together. So, Kat, if you would like to open us up, what made you make the decision to make a living out of your personal brand? Or maybe if you want to give a little backstory.
Yeah, so I came from an architecture background. I was an architect, and I was good at the product stuff, but I did not know business. And so I started a blog in 2012, and it was really just teaching what I was learning, because when you teach other people what you've learned, you actually get better out of yourself. And so I kind of just took people on the journey with whatever I was doing. I have this Shopify store, this is what's working. I have this software thing I'm starting, oh, that didn't work. Oh, I'm gonna kickstart this company, Best Self. And so I kind of took people on the journey as I went, not knowing where it was gonna end up. And there's people on my newsletter who are like, yeah, I've been with you since like the first Kickstarter, and they're still like reading every, 2 weeks when I send them a newsletter, when I'm consistent with it. And so for me, it didn't start like, oh, I'm going to start this personal brand. I really was like, I want to share the value that I'm learning so that it really integrates within me, and then people kind of just follow along.
Amazing. And for Nat, you are, of course, by and large, a very, very busy person. I mean, geez, you're an ER doctor, and you're a mom. How do you balance building your brand with everything you have in your calendar? How do you do that with a full-time job? Probably more full-time than most full-time.
Yes, I feel like I work 10 full-time jobs sometimes, especially with a 15-month-old at home. So I think for everyone, their capacity for work is different. I think for me personally, I've ebbed and flowed in my career where I'm working a ton, I have a ton on my plate, and then other times where it's like, I'm coasting, things are okay, don't have too much on my plate. And I found personally, and this is different for everyone, that when I have a lot on my plate, I'm actually much more fulfilled, that my vacations are more intentional and fulfilling, my time with my daughter and my husband are more intentional. I'm not just antsy to get stuff done, and I really don't take for granted any of my time off. Like every minute I have off is very intentional. And I'm also more passionate about what I'm doing. I think for everyone, if you have purpose and passion in your work, then you're gonna have happiness and joy that spills over into your life. I think, for women especially, if you have passion in your jobs, that's something that's incredible if you want to have children, for your children to see. So don't be afraid to be a working mom. I think it's one of the greatest gifts you can actually give your children, just to model after. And so, just keeping busy, I think, I do well with more on my plate. It helps me keep structure. When I have less on my plate, I actually get less structure. I'm not as good as Kat at being on top of everything, but the other thing is I work in the ER, and it's a luxury in that I can work any time of day. I can schedule my shifts whenever I want. So I work a lot of nights intentionally, so I have my days free. I can make meetings, I can make appointments, be with my kid, and then I work a lot of nights. So, and I love nights, so it doesn't bother me. But just juggling my schedule is really nice because I have the luxury of doing that with my job. And I know a lot of people who are more self-employed, they also have that luxury, but not everyone has that. If you work a typical 9-to-5 job, then you really have to just make things work around it. And with my journalism work, that's typically evenings. Like most of my interviews are in the evenings, and so or early in the mornings. It's very rarely in the afternoon. So I just really try to schedule my work around it.
Amazing. My co-founder told me this comment 2 weeks ago. He said, the busiest people respond the fastest, which is, it's a good motto to live by too. I agree. For Scott, I have a couple questions here for you. One, how has your personal brand evolved, or has it evolved? And how can people start to build their personal brand? What should that first step look like?
Well, the evolution is interesting because, for me at least, it evolved from being a VP of sales and an operator and kind of starting to build it to help me recruit, frankly, to save on expenses like outside recruiters or internal recruiter or even job ads on Craigslist and places like this, Monster, that's how old I am. People use those things to try to save money there, right? Because I was operating with a shoestring kind of budget. So when I'm working for somebody else, I'm a little bit constrained back in the day by what I can say, what I'm scared to say, who I really want to be, who I really feel like I am. So I think I was a little bit more controlled and tepid back then. And now, if I can be so bold, I really don't give a fuck anymore. I work for myself for the last 3.5 years. I run 3 different businesses. I say what I want to say. I am who I am. I don't really care. Damn the consequences. If it scares off certain people that would come my way, I really don't care because I really don't want their money. Because it pulls in the people that I want to work with who are on the same wavelength as me. So it really helps me effectively narrow my ideal customer profile. So the people I do end up talking to, those are the people that are going to be kind of more on my wavelength. So I got started to solve a problem, and that problem was I need to recruit salespeople all over the country. So I started growing my network for that specific purpose, not to become some sort of influencer or even at the time to create a side hustle or make money off of it or anything like that. It was to solve this problem of how do I hire and staff up an office in New York, LA, San Francisco, Austin, Denver, Salt Lake City, Chicago, all at once. So that was why I got started. And the how is, I start by growing the size of my network. Nowadays, if you jump on LinkedIn and places like this, everybody tells you need to create content, those things. I don't agree with that. I don't know the size of anybody's network here, but you could go write the most amazing piece in the world, and if you don't have any network, nobody sees it, and that thing dies on the vine. So there's no point in that to me. Grow your network first. Just reach out to people and say, hey Frank, looking to connect with other founders in Austin. Let me know if I can ever be helpful to you. Steal that line. That's it. That's all you have to say. Don't try to sell them anything. Don't try to ask for anything, right? And then what happens is it starts to compound. You get connected with those people, you get a little more bold and brave because they start to say yes. Then what you can do is you can start to engage with other people's content. Comment, like on their things. That's how you start to find your voice. So every time Frank posts or Kelsey posts or Jacqueline posts, you're chiming in here and there, and that's the practice. And then once you get to a particular size and scale of your brand, then I think it's time to kind of create your own stuff.
Do you think, kind of going back to the first part of what you said, where you were more reserved while you were working for others and now you don't, quote unquote, give a fuck. Knowing what you know now, would you change the way you were when you worked for others, or do you think people should operate a more reserved version of themselves?
Well, I think it was a different climate back then. Employers back then, this is going back at least 10 years, by the way. Employers held a lot more power than they do now, frankly. us as employees, or you all as employees, have more power than you realize and have more power than you've ever had. And that balance of power shifted a lot in 2020 when Pandora's box opened and all of a sudden everybody got to work from home and everybody started focusing on side hustles and all that. That's not going back, by the way. That genie is out of the bottle. We can do whatever we want with that. We won't relinquish that power unless we decide to give it up. So, I don't know everybody's situation. I think you have to be cautious based on your cash reserves, the freedom you have if something goes sour and somebody gets pissed off and lets you go or whatever. You have to be aware of your own situation, right? I think that I would probably continue to be a little bit cautious, only speak about things that I, have experience with and feel educated about, and bide my time until maybe I want to do something on my own, or maybe I can leverage my brand to start to, kind of spread my wings and diversify the things that I'm doing.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Kat, Nat, anything you, I just realized that rhymed.
So I think I really like what Scott said about building your network, and one thing I've talked about is just like thinking about like a bank account where you have to make deposits into your network. So like connecting people, doing favors without being asked. Sometimes like, oh, let me know if I can do anything to help. I'm like, God, I don't know what you could do to help me. But sometimes if someone has a job posting and they're trying to hire, then you send it to someone that you think would be a good hire. You're helping 2 people at one time and you're making deposits into a bank account, and at some point you make a withdrawal where you ask them for something, but you really want to like build that out before you do that. And I think as far as if you have a job, your job security is going to be much higher if you start building a personal brand, because you're essentially becoming an entrepreneur within a company. And if you're, writing Twitter threads about the product or why you like it or whatever it is, and, a lot of people are getting laid off right now, they're going to look at you like, oh, this is someone that we don't want to lose because you've built that up within the company. So I think that, and then say you want to leave and go somewhere else, you can also be like, hey, I'm looking for other opportunities, and there's going to be much more availability for someone that wants to hire you, as long as you sort of built up that brand yourself.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that is I think it's really important to do some soul searching before you really launch into something. I think it's really important to figure out what your core pillars are for your life, what your goals are, and where your boundaries are. Like what are your deep morals, what are your deep ethics? What do you want to create? Where do you want to be in 50 years? What do you want your children, your grandchildren to remember about you? And it doesn't have to be like all this pressure that, oh my gosh, if I do this, is this the final frontier for me? But I think it's important to have those pillars in mind so that when you do, get offered things, and when you do have doors open for you, you really ask yourself, is this right for me? Is this in line with my life goals, and what's a priority for me? I'm sure all of us have said no to things that just weren't in line with our priorities, and chosen to close certain doors and chosen to take risks and go into open doors that we didn't ever anticipate following through with. So I think that's really important, so that when you're ready to go into something you're really passionate about, you go all in, there's no doubt, no hesitation, and it's just like anything, right? You have a pet, you have a child, you fall in love, you're willing to give up your days, your nights, your weekends, anything and everything for it, and it's the same thing with something that you're passionate about. You'll make time for it. You won't be stressed. It will work. It will happen. You will make the time, and you will succeed at it.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. That's actually a really great transition into platforms, because I think people think they need to be something, right? I need to go dance on TikTok, I was kind of alluding to earlier, or I need to go be this on Instagram, or I need to go be that in these other places, or I saw that person, they're making so much money selling their feet. It's just, you're hearing like the craziest things now.
You can say OnlyFans.
Or OnlyFans, yeah, I mean, both work, right? All work, all of the above. So let's talk about platforms. Platforms, obviously, it's constantly changing. The trends are changing, things are changing, and as we all know, algorithm changes. And so when you're thinking about building your personal brand, or you're thinking about doing something and it becomes increasingly more difficult, I want to segue into that and to think, why did you guys choose to go down the avenue that you went down? I know we spoke to you, Scott, a little bit earlier about choosing LinkedIn. It sounds like you didn't choose it. It was just more of like an avenue to find sales folks, and then it ended up growing. But when people think of personal brand, what kind of advice can you give them for where they should look for what they should do?
Well, I think it's extremely difficult to build a brand on any platform. And I would caution people who try to start building a brand across every platform there is all at once. I don't think that that's a great strategy, honestly. I think that it's much smarter to figure out one particular platform, get good at it, figure out what works for you, find ways to monetize it and so forth, and then move to platform 2, and then maybe figure out that one, and then maybe move to platform 3 and things like that. For me, LinkedIn was the obvious choice. I mean, you're talking to someone who doesn't have a Facebook account. I've never had Instagram or really used it until like 2 weeks ago when somebody was like, you really need to create an Instagram account and do this stuff. Somebody's dragged me kicking and screaming to potentially start a TikTok account. Like I'm having a hard time with all of that, frankly. But LinkedIn was the obvious one for me because this one was like professional, right? This was not like, in my impression of these things, was like goofy, silly, or just stuff that I'm not interested in, right? I'm not a fitness guru. I'm not gonna do all that kind of stuff, right? So this felt natural to me to focus on LinkedIn. It was very relevant to what I was doing. And the arc of it is, if you think about the things that are part of your experience in the arc of your life and your career, it's like, for me, I was a salesperson. So I could talk about what it's like to cold call, what it's like to sell, to have a quota, to struggle, to fail, to miss quota, to get fired, to get promoted. Then I was a sales manager. Then I was a VP of sales multiple times. Then I started a business called Surf and Sales. Then I started another business called Thursday Night Sales. Then I fully went into my own consulting business. So there's this arc, right? And now I have all these stories that I can talk about where, to your point, I feel like I have a lot to offer now. I'm 45 years old. There's a whole generation of people coming up who maybe they can learn some things faster and easier than I learned them, right? And I have the opportunity to send the elevator back down, which I think you said earlier, to help people out. And so LinkedIn felt like a natural place for me that was in my comfort zone, right? And so I've really like focused there. I use Twitter a decent amount, but the other ones to me, it's like, this is a black box to me. I don't know what I'm doing yet. Everybody's pushing me to do all this stuff, and I'm like, So I get it, people who are like, oh, I don't know what to do, because I feel that way even now on some of these other platforms, and I've got 100-something thousand followers on one.
Yeah. You were actually, Scott was the first person who gave me permission to be okay with just being good at one. I was like, okay, I can do one. I can focus on one. That was...
It is a lot of pressure to think, you know what, Jacqueline? You need to be everywhere and everything all at once, all the time. And I think that's what holds a lot of us back from making any decision in our life, right? That is overwhelming to somebody like me. But I think if you can pause for a second and say, you know what? I can tackle this one thing. I can try to focus on this thing, this platform. This one feels right for me. I'm gonna go all in on this one, figure this one out. And then I'm gonna move to whatever the other thing is. And you know what? You don't even necessarily have to go to the other thing if you're successful enough at the one. That little dot that she had up there that said, I built a $5 million consulting business. I gotta tell you, that is all based on LinkedIn and the experience and referrals that I've gotten based on my operating experience as a VP of sales.
For Cathryn, your brand was initially built out of the world of blogging. If you were to start again today, would you go down the same path or choose a different platform? And a follow-up to that is, how are you thinking about your personal brand today in this video first era?
I think I probably wouldn't start a blog just because you're not asking people to find you somehow without, you know, back in the day, something makes me sound so old, but like, people are just clicking links all over the place. Like, you're like, oh, I'll go to your website. Whereas now it's much more people like reading tweets or Twitter threads or on LinkedIn. It's much less long form content, unless it's really in depth something. So I would pick what you said, like one or two, and just go in on them. So let's say Twitter and LinkedIn, they're both text-based. You could take something from Twitter and then reformat it for LinkedIn. Don't do the exact same thing, because sometimes different platforms like different things, but you could take TikToks and make them Instagram Reels. So how do you reformat the same content? How do you take tweets that do really well and then also put them into TikToks? But again, just focus on one, and then you can pull people over from one platform to the other. Like, I have not been doing short form video, but I'm like, I should get better at that. So in, what are we in, May? In June, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna post something every single day in June. And I'll probably post on Twitter, oh, this is a challenge I'm gonna set for myself, and then you can pull people from one platform to the other, if you really focus on one.
Yeah, I like that. Kat actually started the 75 hard challenge. So I like that you're doing a challenge with this too.
I like to drag people into whatever I'm doing. Jacqueline actually did 75 hard with me. I'm like, who wants to do it?
I did.
Some friends were like, no one.
You did. I said no.
No, that's amazing. So where are you really focusing on right now? Is it in?
I think Twitter is my preference, and the thing about growing one platform, to say it was LinkedIn or Twitter, it actually became an asset for the business whenever I was running it, because let's just say I needed a team or a tool for conversion, or I don't know how to do this thing. I would just like put out on Twitter, oh, this is a problem I'm having, and I would get all these responses from people being like, oh, I solved this is how, instead of me banging my head against the wall trying to figure it out. And so my team will sometimes be like, Kat, can you just tweet out about this and see what people say? I'm like, yeah, that's my role.
Love that. All right, for Natasha, last but definitely not least, you were literally on the national evening news. How were you first introduced to this world?
Unpredictably. So I always had an interest in journalism. I was a writer before I went to med school. I loved writing. I thought it was a really unique way to tell stories, to reach audiences, and anything, not just in healthcare. But storytelling is like an incredible power, and now at that time there was no social media, so there was no quick storytelling. Everything was, writing in very long form. I went into med school and went into residency doing emergency medicine, and I knew I wanted to do global health. And during my last year, I matched for fellowship in global health in New York City, and I knew I was going to be going there. I applied for a global health scholarship. I got it, and then they told me that I could use it during my last year residency to either do some kind of international work or global health work. And they didn't really give me too many constraints on what that was, so I had to make a really important decision, and it was probably the best decision I could have made. And I'd done tons of work in lots of different countries, and I could have easily gone down the same path of saying, hey, I want to do this, implement this in X place, and fundraise for this. And instead, I just took a chance, and I asked them if they would let me use that scholarship to go to New York City and work at ABC News and do some work there. And I applied to ABC News, they accepted me, and then they kind of let me use my scholarship for that, because I told them it was healthcare, it was journalism, it was global health, but from America. And so I did that. I worked with Richard Besser at ABC News, at World News, and Diane Sawyer was there at the time. I worked there for several months, and then I went to fellowship right after in New York City. And so that's kind of what launched me into journalism, but it was always in the background. My priority was always being a physician. I finished my fellowship. I did a bunch of international work. I was always teaching, working in academics. I ended up moving down to Austin, which is not a media hub, as you know. There are no big networks here. And then when the pandemic hit, that's when I really pivoted into on-air journalism and writing. That was the first time that they were really allowing people to go on air and do correspondence remotely. And so I could work again for ABC News, I could work for CNN, I could do interviews for all these networks that were initially off limits here. And choosing to live in Austin, I thought was going to be the worst decision, and I was going to lose out on this opportunity, and it wasn't. And so, if you have a chance, take it. And if it's in line with your passion and your goals, like, don't give up. I promise you, like, doors will open. You just have to take the risk sometimes, and it'll be worth it.
Amazing. Okay. So I know that we're going to transition now over into content, and I know that content can be a struggle for a lot of people, staying relevant and also staying on trend. How would you guys, and then, okay, let's also take it one step further. There's also tone of voice and how you share the content, if you want to be polarizing, if you want to be more neutral or positive or trend setting. So I'm going to go down the aisle. How would you guys describe yourselves when you're sharing your content? I can guess for you, Scott, but.
I've met these people for 30 minutes and they can probably guess. I think that I say a lot of things that people think that are a little bit scared to say. I think I stick up for employees and kind of the little guy quite often. I think I talk about a lot of different topics. A lot of people will tell you pick one topic and go super deep on this one topic and like niche down, and that felt really boring to me. I can't talk about the same thing over and over and over. I just can't. And I feel like I have lots of different things that I have interest in and a lot of different experiences. So I kind of cover the gamut. You'll see me talk about selling tactics, leadership tactics, entrepreneurship tactics, state of the union, future of sales type stuff. So I kind of tend to talk about things that I'm passionate about and feel in the moment. I don't plan my content out. I would be very curious to hear from our other panelists if they do that stuff. I don't. I can't do that. I'm not somebody that sits down like Sunday and writes like 27 different posts for the next 3 weeks. I can't do it. I wake up, if I feel something, I write it. If I don't, I don't. Most of the time, luckily, I do feel something, and so I let it out. But I think that's my style. It comes from a place of experience. And there's one other thing that I'll add, and then I'll pass the mic. My brand is also that I'm extremely accessible. I respond to every single message that I get across every platform. This is not something that most people do. If any of you texted me, I promise you'll get a response inside of 2 hours, and if you don't, I'm dead. I'm serious. If any of you DM me on LinkedIn, it'd probably take me 2 to 3 days max to get back to you.
You know the sales?
Yes. Anybody. It doesn't matter. So I have become sort of known for one of these people on LinkedIn in particular in the sales arena and whatnot that is accessible, that will help, that isn't somebody who's just taking all the time, to your point about deposits and withdrawals, right? I'm constantly just saying, hey, message me. Here's my, thoughts. You message me and say, hey, saw you the other night, I had a question for you. You will get a response from me. And so this is something that I have cultivated over the years, and I feel really passionately about. So I think that's how I would describe my brand, if you will.
Yeah, wow. It's a very tall order to respond to everyone.
Yeah, I called it LinkedIn bankruptcy so many times. But I do like responding to people in my newsletter. When I send it out, I'll like put in like a question in relation to something I write, and anyone that writes me back, I will like reply. Sometimes there's a few replies back and forth, which is good because you're building a connection with someone. Like, there's not just a random email on your list, but it's also good for the email service provider because they see, oh, this is someone responding from like a mass email, and I think it like gives you points within that. Not that that's why I do it, but I learned that recently. I'm like, oh, that's great. And then I'm kind of like you, where I also struggle to niche down. When I do that, I just get bored, and I feel like people can tell when you're not interested in what you're talking about. Like, I don't sit down and write a month of posts. Sometimes I'll write down ideas now with my newsletter throughout the week to be more consistent. I'll like write stuff that I'm interested in, so then when I go to sit down and write the whole thing, I have like all these little pieces I can pull from, instead of what I used to do, and I'd be like, I should send something out today and I would do the whole thing, and it will take me much longer and it's not as good. Whereas if I just take snippets throughout the 2 weeks of things that I'm interested in or thoughts, it's just a lot of mental load that comes away when I'm going to write it. And then listen for, like, put out a lot of noise and then listen for signal with what's working. So if you are talking about something on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and you're getting people commenting or liking, that might be something you want to dive deeper on. So if you're not sure on where you want to go, like you said, like, talk about a bunch of stuff and then see what people are actually interested in hearing about if you're not sure what you want to talk about.
And Natasha, please answer, but I also have to ask, who knew medical advice would be so polarizing?
I know. I did not know. Yeah, so that's a very tough question to answer, because I definitely would say I'm more neutral. I think that's very intentional because of my career. I have to be really cautious about what I put out in the open, because the CEO of my hospital is going to follow me, my patients might follow me, my family members. I have to think of every single person that this could reach. And also, it's really important, especially when I go on air, that when I talk about things, it's not to not be authentic, and it's not to not stand up for things that I think are right in public health, that inevitably are political discussions because they affect the health of human beings. But it's to do it in as much of an objective and not subjective way as possible. And so I have to be neutral in that sense. It's actually very important. We're actually trained in it in medicine, but also in global health in particular. I'm sure you've all heard of MSF or Doctors Without Borders. They, set the bar for global health for a long time, and one of their tenets of the organization is to be nonpartisan, non-political in any way, do what's right, but not associate with anything political, any political party, any government when they go in, and that's what allows them to have the reputation they have with any country they go to. There's trust. There's never a fear that, oh my gosh, you're going to come in here with an ulterior motive, or you're going to do X, Y, or Z. And it's the same thing with us. The way we care for patients, to not judge our patients, and it's the same thing when I go on air. I have to just be really objective and try not to play into political narratives, which is difficult because it can hurt someone, right? At the same time, the more you play into politics and the more you play into sensationalism and clickbait, the more you will become viral and the more followers you will get, certainly. But that just, it can't be what healthcare providers do, and a lot of them do that, and it's unfortunate because they end up losing a lot of the audience that needs to hear what they're saying.
Seeing what happens and seeing what was happening, how did you just not get on any of your social mediums and just, if it were me, I'd lose my mind. How are you not listening to me? Or just any kind of frustration. How do you refrain sometimes?
That was very difficult. There were definitely times where I posted things and then 10 minutes later was like, no, delete it. Shouldn't be saying that.
Like close friends on Instagram.
Right. Yes, and it's extremely difficult. Definitely having an outlet to share those feelings to my colleagues and to people who I knew understood what was going on while refraining from doing it publicly was very important. COVID was not a political thing in medicine. It was just an objective scientific thing. So everyone I worked with, no matter what political party they were on, we were all on the same page, so it frustrated all of us. But yeah, being really conscious of how I would address it on air. There was incessant trolling. I've never had to deal with that in my life, to the point where like I had to step back for a month and not do interviews. I just didn't want people finding me. As you can imagine, the way things were during the last election and during when the vaccines rolled out, and it was a lot. But it, you know, it was just a really big learning point that you're going to face adversity and you're going to face really difficult moments where you want to, you know, be authentic in a certain way, but you also don't know how much should I filter, how much should I not. And I will say one thing that's very certain is don't refrain from being authentic. You want to stand up for what's right, and you should never not do that. You should never silence yourself out of fear, but you should do it in a very tactful way that's objective and something that someone can't really argue against.
And for Cathryn, I know as you were growing your business, you were sharing all of the trials and tribulations within your newsletter and your blog. Did you ever find yourself asking yourself, am I being too open? Am I not being open enough? Am I being too transparent? Am I not being transparent enough? How do you think about your audience? Because you were sharing the stories as you were going.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't share some stories as they were happening, for many reasons, but I have had team members be like, should we be sharing this, or should you be sharing this? Because we dealt with like an inventory manager that embezzled from us, and he did it in a very tricky way, but we figured it out, and I was like, I'm just going to share it and talk exactly how he did it, because it's like Dateline meets e-commerce, and I'd be interested. And after I shared about it, and the guy got arrested and, you know, didn't go to jail, but it was like a whole thing, and I'm like, I didn't know this was going to be a part of business, is like dealing with these type of people. And when I shared it online, like so many people came to me and were like, oh yeah, I dealt with like some version of that. Someone was like, oh yeah, if you haven't dealt with that, you're either too early or you haven't found it yet. And so, you know, I share business partner issues. I've just been like very open of like this, because like I said, I didn't get into this thinking I was gonna grow this business. I really started it with a product that I wanted to exist, and then the business grew from there. And so I've made a lot of mistakes and learned a lot of lessons. And I think one of the pieces of content you can sort of share is just look back at the last like 2 to 3 years. Like, what are the problems that you faced? What have you learned? What are the mistakes you've made? What are the tools that you've used? And just like sharing that is like a great way to get started. And so for me, it was like, oh yeah, I had this embezzler, which is like now an interesting story. It's like my unofficial 401k, I say, because those restitution checks when they come in. So yeah, I think like some people will be turned off, but I think more people, when you share like the negative, because nobody wants to hear someone just brag about, oh, I've done this much in sales, like, I've done this much in sales, we're growing this much, I won this award. It's like, yeah, great. I'm like, I had this thing stolen from me, I made this mistake. And so I think when you share the good things, but you also share the bad things that usually most people don't share. It actually makes you stand by more, because people will like pay more attention, because they know that you're not just sharing the shiny good things that make everyone feel good, and you're really trying to teach people how to, you know, not make these really foundational mistakes that I made. And it's like so many people, like I talked about the operating agreement I wish I would have had. And like, I had people be like, this should be taught at like university, like this is great. This is the earliest decision you make as a founder, is choosing your co-founder. And when you don't have the right like agreements in place, it can really screw you up later. And so I've had so many people come to me and like, oh, I actually took this advice and set this up, and now it's not going so well, but we have this agreement, and it didn't turn into this big issue. And so that makes me feel good.
And for Scott, what do you see the content that you share with your audience, what tends to get the most traction, the results, the virality, I guess? What are things that people like to hear?
Well,
or not like to hear?
Yeah, in my opinion, there's actually only 3 types of content. That's it. There's education, You're teaching somebody something that you know, sharing experiences that you've been through. That's number one. Number two is inspiration. You're doing something to like inspire people. You're telling a painful, traumatic story potentially, so other people will relate to that and are, you know, inspired to push through. Okay. So education, inspiration, and then there's entertainment. And entertainment is whatever you want it to be. It could be goofy, it could be silly, it could be kind of talking smack, making fun of yourself, making fun of something else. That's it. Education, inspiration, or entertainment. Those are the three different types of content that exist to me. And any one of those can go viral, right? And so if you're thinking of like what type of content to share, to me, that's it. Those three things. Make sure you're touching one of those things. And if you can hit the holy trinity of all three of those in one post or one video or whatever, those are the things that for me have like, you know, gone viral or whatever. I've hit 1 million, you know, views and stuff like that.
We also had a question that came in. So, and it was relating to you. They said, how do you get to the place where you're comfortable being who you are and not caring? How did you get there?
Well, what you don't see is, you know, the better part of 20 years working absurd hours and building and scaling and growing sales organizations for tech companies. I didn't just, you know, come out of the womb talking the way that I do now. You learn and you grow, and the experiences and successes that you've had start to give you confidence, right? So you've done this job one time, you have this amount of confidence. You've done it 3-4 times, now your confidence is up here. You've done it 5-6 times, it's like, listen, get out of my way. Just let me do my job, right? And as you go through these different things, your confidence grows, and you get validated hopefully by, you know, promotions, certain pay, certain clients you pick up, opportunities to be on air and things like this, right? You know, and it's not to say that your arrogance is growing. It's just, wow, people actually care about what I have to say, right? And it's very awkward at the beginning. You're like, why am I here? I mean, Jacqueline was listing off your accomplishments, and I literally said to my girlfriend, Kelsey, I'm like, what am I doing here? Right? Like, that little bit of imposter syndrome doesn't really ever go away, and if it does, it's like, uh-oh, you might be a narcissist. Right? So, that's how I feel.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think I've ever met anyone that doesn't have imposter syndrome, except maybe a couple narcissists, so you're right.
Yeah, well, we may or may not have had a president.
Yeah, that's true.
That was one, but I don't have to worry about sitting on the fence the same way.
Yeah. Actually, so for Natasha, you know, you have to balance a delicate line, and you do have to really think about your personal brand. I'm curious how in the world of medicine, other doctors, other medical journalists as well are thinking about it. Are they towing the line? Are there any people that are outspoken in a way that does politicize them? How you spoke to this briefly when we were just talking just now, but can you elaborate a little bit more on how just us as an audience can trust, of course, medical doctors and where we should go, and maybe who are some of your favorite ND content creators that tend to be more neutral?
There are plenty, I would say, of physicians out there that are very political and are very polarized in their viewpoints, and I think it's pretty obvious when you see their content out there. They actually tend to have a lot of followers, obviously. They put out very political posts on both sides of the aisle. This is not saying one is worse than the other, even in the content they put out. It's just, you know, they are very politically attached, and they're not, you know, usually not trained in public health, or they probably wouldn't do that. But they're just like clinically trained physicians. They're going out there and they're often stepping out of their lane. So I would say the red flags to look for with information that you get from healthcare professionals on air. A unless they're professional journalists, like, Jennifer Ashton, for example, from ABC, she's phenomenal. She has a team working with her, so she's an OBGYN, she still practices clinically, but she has a team of physicians under her who are providing her with the stories, doing the data analysis, giving her the information, so she has the authority to speak on lots of different levels. But, if just a clinically practicing, OBGYN starts speaking about something that's not technically in their lane, just take that with a grain of salt, that, they're not trained in that specialty. And so, it happens with a lot of things. I'm an ER physician, I see everything. So it often bothers me when I see physicians who don't ever even, like a radiologist who isn't even seeing a patient clinically, speaking about gun control or things in a way that is clearly, missing the mark, that they're not witnessing the tragedies that we're seeing every day. So I would say to just keep an eye out for that. If you're looking at someone and all of their posts, I'm just talking about medical professionals, I'm not talking about anything else, and all of their posts seem very politically oriented, then there's some agenda there. There's some, motivation for their posts, and it's going to get them lots of followers, but it doesn't mean you should follow them. I would say the people who are, giving evidence-based medicine, there's a cardiologist, Danielle Bernardo, she's phenomenal. She puts out so much information, it's all evidence-based. It's objective, and she does it in a way that's like incredible, and people just love, they eat it up. It's like, I wish I could put out content like her, but those are the people you want to go to. They're giving you information that's objective, and not, I feel, and I think, and oh my gosh, I wish it was different. That's how journalism has gone right now. It's a lot of opinion-based journalism, which isn't what it should be. It's not what it was intended to be, and so just be wary of that. It's self-fulfilling. That's what social media is doing to the media and journalism. It's, rewarding those things that become viral rather than authentic and fact-based journalism.
And by the way, we have all your emails, and so we will be sending out a recap. So all these wonderful people she just mentioned, we will also share with you too if you're curious. And so for Cathryn, when you see young people that are starting out and they want to be thought leaders in their field, or they want to do something like you did, where they have this great product idea and they want to get that following, they want to get that audience, what kind of advice would you give them for folks that are just starting out and thinking, how can I build an audience? How can I share this product that I'm dreaming of for the world?
Yeah, I think how you become a thought leader online is doing something interesting offline, and like whatever that may be. So don't think that you need to start everything online. If you want something to exist, like talk to people who also want it. Create like the MVP of it. For a while, it was just like a PDF that I was showing to people, and then even when we launched the Kickstarter, we were giving away the PDF for free, which people were like, "You're insane! Like people don't have to buy it." And I'm like, it's kind of annoying. Have you ever had to deal with a printer? Like this is like you have to print it out. It's just like not fun. So some people like said, "Oh, I couldn't afford this." Then I used the PDF, and then I found value in it, and then they came back and they used it. So it's almost like your returns are really low because you're kind of giving it away for free. So figure out like how you can make the minimum viable product or whatever it is you want to exist, and then just talk to people about the product, who find out where they hang out, show it to them. Don't order a bunch of it and have it sitting in your garage that you have to then sell. So like crowdfunding was great for that, because it's a way to pre-sell a product, validate that people actually want it without putting any money up front. That's like the Kickstarter. When I launched it, the goal was the minimum goal that I would need to manufacture this product, which was like $15,000, and we raised like 320 something. It's been so long that I don't remember. It was a lot, and that allowed us to print like 30,000 units. So that like launched the business. We never raised money. We did over 45 million in sales, and that was all from starting with a product people actually wanted, and then listening and expanding the product line and growing the brand that way. But literally, it started with like, oh, I want this to exist, and I mean, I did have an architecture background, so I knew how to design things, but like with Fiverr and all these tools that we didn't have, like there's just so much you can do now. Like AI these days is insane. Like I don't know what I would have done if I had all the tools that you had like 10 years ago.
Maybe it would have been overwhelming, too overwhelming. Or maybe, do you think it would have helped or hurt?
It would help in some ways, you know, like with content. I think AI writers have a lot to go. It's, you know, you can usually tell. But it is good for like brainstorming ideas. It's almost like an intern that you can just talk to, which is how I use it. Where you just like feed it things and see what comes back, and then it will prompt something. So like, don't try to become a content creator and do everything through AI. Really just like practice and then share your work. I think there's this whole idea of like sharing and like building public and sharing what's working and why you did things the way you did, because most people don't sort of share all that online, and the people that do usually, it's like, oh, I'll follow this person because they're talking about real stuff that they're interested in. Like I talked about, oh, this is how we grew from one product to all these products, but here's how we almost like screwed it up and created these like crappy products that would never have taken us anywhere.
That's you know, I want to touch back on your point of AI, because actually that's something that's having a real impact on personal brand that we haven't really even touched on. Should people be afraid of it? And this is kind of open to all. Should people be empowered by it? How are you guys thinking about AI?
I mean, I think you should be empowered by it. You should use it as a tool. It's just like another tool. And it's going to get better and better. I don't think we have to get scared of it for like 5-6 years.
You get 5 years before they overtake.
Yeah,
like
everything. You can definitely, you know, it's like this. I think I read a trend recently of just like how small this bubble is, and maybe we were in a bubble because we were talking about it, but like mainstream America is not talking about AI, and so I think like using it as a tool, again, I think of it like as a digital intern, and if you just get better at like how you're training it and prompting it, it's like pretty amazing. Like it's on constantly a tab on my computer at this point.
Same.
AI, well, from a healthcare perspective, I think it could be incredible. I think for things like radiology reads, you know, things that are pretty objective can be, I've been a radiologist, but pretty,
It's actually a meaning of radiologist, you didn't know.
But yeah, I think it could be pretty incredible. There's already a lot of momentum behind bringing AI into healthcare. I think it could also be very scary because once, you know, people had WebMD, it just made my life miserable. People asking the internet, Google, you know, what does my chest pain mean? And so I'm wondering, like, what's ChatGPT gonna tell them? It's gonna be is it gonna be worse, or is it going to be better? Is it going to give them more realistic expectations? I highly doubt it's going to give realistic expectations, because just by nature of it being this massive resource, it's going to give them all the possibilities and probably larger differentials, and make me see a lot more patients in the ER for things that don't need to be coming to the ER. But yeah, I think there's obvious fear with AI in society and in the world that I think is possible. I think it's a very low likely scenario, but it could be horrific. So there's definitely some healthy fear I'm hoping that, you know, higher ups have. But for us, like the research, I mean, it's incredible, like the things you can do already. And it's growing at a rate that's way more rapid than anything else. Like iPhone, the internet, laptops. I mean, this is like exponential growth. So who knows where it will go, but it could be pretty incredible.
Do you have any thoughts?
Many thoughts, but I'm not sure we have time to explore.
Unfiltered.
Yeah, I'm not going to be filtered. First of all, I can't think of a single piece of technology that we all tried to resist that didn't end up winning anyways. So, you can resist it all you want. You're fucked either way. Okay? So, the fact that we're sitting in this room talking about it, to your point, we may be in a bubble, but that means we're ahead of everybody else. So, if we're ahead of everybody else, we should learn to use it in ways that assist us and help us in our lives and in our careers. So, it's not going to steal your job at the moment, right? It might if you do low-level admin type work that can be automated away. So if you do any of that kind of work, you should be thinking, oh shit, I need to upskill myself big time. Because the people in the short term, like in the next 5 years or so, that know how to use it the right way, writing the right prompts, getting the information, cutting down on research, that type of thing, right? Creating efficiency gains for yourself, it's going to really be a boon to whatever it is that you do. I am terrified, candidly, extrapolating out into the future, because I'm one of these dorks that's like, Skynet is coming, and Terminator, and Resident Evil, and all this kind of stuff. People write these movies and screenplays for a reason, people. So I definitely can see a point in time where me coming from a sales perspective, why will the salesperson need to exist in the future? Because I'm telling you right now, I have an AI humanoid being who onboards my community. I run a few businesses, but one of my communities is GTM United. It's sales and revenue professionals coming together. I have an AI humanoid who onboards people. All I did was write the script. That's it. Because I wanted to like personally touch and onboard everybody, right? But I don't have time for that. So I found this tool and I'm using it. And it feels personal, even though it's really not. Oh, I'm both like, I can't resist it, it's coming. I gotta find ways to use it to make me efficient, but also I am terrified.
I also think there's probably an opportunity for someone who has a job to just become like the person in your company that helps your company be more efficient with AI. Like, yeah. Like I talked to other company entrepreneur people, and they're hiring, they're like, you know what, I would actually just want someone to like be looking into what we could be doing with AI to make ourselves more efficient.
Well, that role will exist, and some roles will go away. That's what will happen.
But if you do that, your role won't go away.
If
You in particular won't go away.
If you can be the AI like trainer or puppeteer, right? That's a good point. Well, I'm going to move to the audience questions, but before I do that, I just want to give a big round of applause to everyone here and all of the. I just realized the time. I was like, oh my gosh, we gotta like get to these questions here. So, kind of speaking to what we're talking about, there's a question from a student in the audience. I want to be a serial entrepreneur. I'm a student graduating soon, and I'm wondering, is it more valuable to get a job right out of school first, or should I pursue the ideas I have, or any ideas I have right away? And this is open for anyone.
I mean, I think jobs can be super valuable if you get a job that you're going to learn something in. So if you, especially in your 20s, focus on, not on the money, but on the learning you will get from the job. So if you have few opportunities and one is like pretty standard but the pay is high, you will learn much more going, I don't know if you want to work with a startup or whatever, but if you focus on learning in your 20s, and you can work on your ideas on the side. But for me, like even when I had my architecture job, I started a business on the side, and it wasn't until that was making like 5x my income did I leave my job, because I was very like risk averse of just, and I kind of don't work well with grand expenses of time. So I need to like have more just pockets here and there, and I think unless you know exactly what you want to do, is just get a job where you're going to learn, and then if it can be close to an idea that you have, then you just do it on the side until it's ready to go, and then you can hop over.
I have a very difficult time answering this question without understanding the context, frankly, because all of our circumstances are completely different, right? So you raise your hand. Is this you?
Yeah. I'll just expose myself.
I love it.
Go for it. Go for it.
Yeah, so I'm studying computer science. So like I recognize that right out of school I could get a pretty sweet gig for like a lot of different things depending on where I go. But I have an idea that I'm working on for a school-sponsored startup incubator, and I don't know how it's gonna go yet. So for all I know, it could be a complete flop. But it just got me thinking, like, what should my I graduate next year, so like what should my game plan be? Like, am I better off just going to get a job for learning, like Cathryn said, or if I have another like idea like this that I think it will work, like am I better off just starting that now?
Well, if you're starting it anyway for school, right?
Yes, but what I'm saying is like if that didn't go well or there was like a different idea. Mostly I'm just like thinking ahead if that makes sense. Like is it worth getting a job? I don't know. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Allow me to plan your life for you, real quick. Not that I disagree with what you said, but if you go get a job, you're most likely going to be asked to do this thing that fits in this little box, right? You go start your own business, you're learning the whole enchilada, everything. You're going to have to learn not just about engineering, but about sales, about service, about marketing, all these different kinds of things. My experience is that most people, when they have to drink from a fire hose, their learning is massively accelerated. Even if you fuck up this business idea that you have, the first one, the second one, whatever, if you're in a position where you can do that and still pay your bills and still be healthy physically and mentally and all that kind of stuff, if it was me, I would go all in on myself. But not everybody has that situation. I come, for example, from the poorest county in all of California. I spent 4 years in the hospital fighting for my life in my early 20s, while most people were working and getting life experience. I had 9 major surgeries, 4 emergency life-saving surgeries, got addicted to opioids, had to kick off dope. I never had a job until I was 27 years old. So my circumstances are not one of those circumstances. It's like, oh, I should have gone all in, bet on myself, and done my own business, because I didn't have the same situation as some other people. But if I did, I would not have gone and got a job and learned this one thing, learn how to code. I would have bet on myself and maybe my co-founders like Frank and Jacqueline or whatever, because I could learn all this stuff really in an accelerated process. And even if I fuck up, what's the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing that can happen, and I know you for 3 seconds, so, okay. But the worst thing that can happen is you try that, you fuck up, and you still can go get an engineering software developer job somewhere that pays you $150K. How is that bad? That's the worst thing that can happen? You're still healthy, right? You still have support from maybe family, friends. I'm making tons of assumptions, but family, friends, or whatever. You're going to be okay. That doesn't sound like a bad gig to me. So I think you lean back on what's the worst possible thing that could happen if this thing failed. And it sounds like you have a solid foundation to fall back on. Again, I know you for 3 seconds, but I might go all in because of that.
I know you more now. I also said that.
To give one contrarian opinion here, some of my best lessons were watching others fail. So if you do decide to join a company, the most important thing to do outside of learning the thing you're doing is just observing everybody else. Because you can take that, the good, the bad, the ugly, and bring it to. So, but yes, I agree. If you have the safety net, go for it. You know, I think when you ask any founder, what would you do different? It's like, well, I wish I would have done this thing, you know, a couple years ago.
I mean, she has a really good point. Because also, I got started in my career at 27 years old. I waited about 16 years before I did my own thing. I did all that she's talking about. Because like you, I ended up being a little bit risk adverse. And I thought, I just gotta keep doing this. I gotta build credibility. I gotta build experience. I gotta make it to a point where nobody can deny that I know what the hell I'm talking about. And I can't do this while holding the mic, but like, here's my W-2 income from my job over here on the left side. and here's me doing my own thing on the right side, and I'm not leaving until my own thing stuff matches my W-2 thing, and when those matched, I dropped the mic on the W-2 and walked away. So I might be talking a big game over here, but I actually did, for my circumstances, I actually did what Jacqueline's talking about. See how I talk out of both sides of my mouth?
And you too, you can too. Here's a question that I think is interesting, because I think a lot of us feel this. What if I don't think I'm important enough for people to care about what I think?
Just get that thought out of your mind, first of all. We all feel like that, first of all. Even the most prominent person on television has feelings of, of insecurity, doubt, imposter syndrome, whatever you want to call it. So just know that that feeling is very real, and everyone has it to some degree. And stay with it and get used to that being uncomfortable. Putting yourself out there, getting outside of your comfort zone is critical. The first time I went on air, I was terrified. I was like, I only write. What am I doing? I don't even know where do I look. Like the first time I went on air was during COVID. It was literally on my iPhone because I was in the ER when they wanted to do the interview. I didn't have a laptop. I was like, oh my god, I have my scrubs and I don't have makeup on. This is so embarrassing. And it was terrifying. And I just remember right before just thinking like, this is hilarious. I just kept thinking, this is so ridiculous that this is happening now, and nobody cares, and I don't care. I'm just gonna be me and pretend like I'm FaceTiming my mom. And the interview went great, and it was terrifying inside. But then when I watched it later, I was like, okay, I can do this. And the more and more you put yourself out there, I promise you, you're gonna get, you're gonna post things and you're gonna share information that people just aren't going to share or aren't going to like. And that doesn't mean they don't care, that they're not reading it. It just means that you're just getting your feet wet and you're practicing. And every single time you do that, every single time you fail, and every single time a post gets like some negative comment, that's part of the fertilizer of your mind that's growing. These are all lessons to learn from. So get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and then I promise you that's just going to go away over time.
Thank you guys for that.
I think everyone has a unique point of view on something, and just sharing it openly. And I think just being uncomfortable with like putting yourself out there. Like you don't wake up and be like, I'm a world-class painter, and then the first time you try it, you're not very good. Like the first video I ever put online, it was fucking awful. My own brother was like, I couldn't watch it. It was just I knew it was terrible. It took 4 hours, and like it was terrible. And if I had stopped then, I would have been like, I would have been on my grave. Like this was the worst video ever. But you like have to like learn and get better, and you will over time. And just don't give up the first time you try something.
Can you read the question one more time? I know what it is. I just want everybody to hear it one more time.
What if I don't think I'm important enough for people to care about what I think?
So, what I hear is, that means the rest of us think we're super important. I promise you, and I've known them for 3 seconds as well, I promise you we don't feel that way. But that's what I hear when you say that. Oh, I think I'm super important? I literally have no idea what I'm doing. Every single day, I message somebody in my network, what the fuck am I doing? Is this the right decision? I have imposter syndrome all the time. I had it 30 seconds before I came on stage when all of her accolades were being read off. I wanted to run out the door. You have to focus not on this like big, huge reaction. You have to think, what if one person got helped by what I shared or what I talked about today? I'm fortunate and blessed enough that I get a few messages every single day from total strangers that I don't have a relationship with at the moment, that message me and say, your content or your this has helped me do this. No paycheck as of yet. has been as rewarding as some of those messages. And I bet any of you who don't know me at all didn't look at me and say, whoa, this dude was in the hospital for 4 years straight. I literally didn't breathe a breath of fresh air for 4 years. I could have a whole conversation with you about all that. She's over there going, I really want to know this story. I bet you didn't know that. And I promise you that everybody in this room has gone through something in their life that the rest of us would think is absolutely impossible and there is no way that we could have got through it. And when you talk about those things out loud, you talk about that scary monster under the bed, you normalize it and make it safe for everybody else. And when you help one person do that, that person might become a little bit brave and they pass it on forward. That stuff matters. And I would encourage you to focus on that. Not, I'm not important, or all these people think they're so important. No. Think about somebody, one person that maybe sees your message and is inspired or helped in some particular way, because that makes it worth it. For real.
So I just wrote, I'm being kicked off.
Thank you. So yes, we are now at the end of time for this panel. So I just want to thank everyone here, one for coming, of course, to our panel of experts for sharing their thoughts and their insights. I hope you guys had some feeling of inspiration or some takeaways you can go home and just know everybody has something important to say. Everybody can build each other up. We all have scary monsters under our bed, and by sharing them and exposing them, it humanizes us in a way that creates togetherness that I think this world is lacking right now. So by sharing can also connect us. So just thank you everyone for coming. We really appreciate it. And thank you to all our panel.
And of course, today we still have drinks and snacks. I think we have this place till 9. So thank you guys for coming.